Yo, welcome in, T-Woo, Travis Wizard here, now bringing you some matches with the Tempo Temurskai standard deck. If you missed the deck tech, make sure to check that out. Looking at 4 different matches here. The first one against Jeskai, which is a popular tournament deck. In my experience, can be a fairly interesting match, and I would say that I'm about 50-50. I've noticed that opponents mulligan a lot against me. I don't know if that's a feature of the deck or if it's been small sample size. I've maybe played 6 matches and have gone something like 4-2. We see the opponent mulliganed twice this game. I chose to pick this game not because it shows what happens when the opponent mulligans a lot, but because the next game is fairly interesting, as we get to see how the draw spells match up against Tasigur. And that's one of the reasons that I think that this matchup is pretty decent, is we have plenty of removal for the Dragon Master Outcasts and their Jaces. And they have stuff like Crackling Doom, which is not the most efficient way to take care of Honored Hierarch. And then the game kind of comes down to big delve spells, where we have 6 draw, and they tend to have 3 or 4 and a couple Tasigurs, which Tasigur tends to be weak to bounce spells. Also, we have Lumbering Falls in this matchup and they don't, so that gives us some extra gas in the long game. Here we see I decided to go with the Wild Slash instead of a Mantis Rider, because we had only 1 red mana and wanted to make sure that thing got off, or we would be prepared to fight it as soon as possible. And it ended up paying off as we get Mantis Rider with Negate up, and can just kind of protect our position from here. Opponent fetching. And their draw was just pretty awful. I picked this really for the second game. I mean, there's a few other options, but I think that this is reasonably illustrated and we can celebrate. We can celebrate the joys of a bunch of delve card draw. So here's one interesting decision where we can either keep up Negate to protect our Mantis Rider, but we have a few threats, or we can tap out for Dig Through Time, which I like doing because even if the opponent has Counterspell, that's fine. We just have so much mana, I would like to use it. So I cast Dig Through Time and the opponent responds by conceding, so we get to go to the second game. Where again it's semi-lopsided as the opponent mulligans once more. But if you've had that experience with Dark Jeskai, maybe it's a feature of the deck. I also tend to keep a wider range of hands than most players. So the opponent leads with the Jace here. There's the Jace. And we have Fiery Impulse to clear that. Go ahead and take a look at our deck with this fetch land here. So for sideboarding, I'm not necessarily a huge fan of changing a whole lot. We still want all of our burn, and the Jeskai Ascendancy combo is not the most useful. The main thing is we want to increase our... Well, it looks like I didn't actually sideboard here, which is fine. Our primary plan gives us a lot of different options. If I were to maybe change anything, more counterspells, more disdainful strokes, more negates, so we can fight over the card draw wars. But again, most of our cards are pretty good and pretty useful here. We've got plenty of targets for our burn. We have plenty of uses for our tricks. We have uses for our bounce, which we're going to see this game. So the starting plan works fine. I guess cutting some of the tertiary, secondary card draw spells, such as Anticipate and Tormenting Voice for some more counterspells, could be a useful line of play. So here, we've got Savage Knuckleblade coming in, and the opponent trades Crackling Doom, which is fine. We basically trade mana, 4 life for 2 life, however. And then the window is open for us to Treasure Cruise, which pulls us way ahead. The opponent has 1 mana up. They might have a Dispel, but they're not going to get to use it. So, I played that Treasure Cruise hoping to find a Counterspell or a Disperse or something like that. We could have tapped more mana and left Delve in our graveyard to use as fuel later. But I wanted to push our tempo advantage while we were ahead. Also worth noting that Crackling Doom turn, I made us vulnerable to Languish, and some of them play a few copies of that card, but it's not as likely as Crackling Doom, and even if the opponent played Languish there, then we would have had a great opportunity to Treasure Cruise to refill. Alright, so this is really why I wanted to show the matchup, because we go with Treasure Cruise, the opponent goes with Tasigur, we can bounce Tasigur and wake up a 3/3, and deploy Lumbering Falls as well, and the opponent has to spend 6 mana to Tasigur again, and we can wake up another land and knock the opponent to 6, and they've shown they don't have Languish before, so once again they go for a Tasigur, and I would bet you they're holding Dispel. They've kept up a blue on several turns all game, but we haven't played a single instant, so instead of going for 2 Fiery Impulses to finish off Tasigur, we can use Bounding Krasis to tap the Tasigur, or we could have woken up Lumbering Falls and attacked for 9, so this is when the matchup goes optimally. Sometimes it goes a lot worse, but in general our major tactical advantages having more Delve card draw, because yeah, that's basically what the match comes down to more often than not. There's so much trading that whoever can come out ahead on cards will probably win, but again, I'll call this a 50-50 match. It's not necessarily great. Give the opponent an extra card this game and 2 extra cards last game, and it would be more interesting. But I hope you found this match educational as well, as we'll move on to next up what's probably the best matchup, and then move into some more difficult matches from there. So, see you in the next one. Yo, welcome in, T-Woo here, back for another match of the Tempo Temurskai, this time up against the red-green powered ramp deck with Hangerback Walkers, Ugins, etc. This time I'm running, just to show some of the different options, Jeskai Charm and Ojutai's Command instead of Brutal Expulsion, and a few other tweaks, and we can take a look at the next fetch land that comes up. So, interesting in this matchup is they have Jotty Offshoot and they have Hangerback Walker. They have several ways to gum up the ground from an Honored Hierarch, and so far we haven't been able to do anything, stuck on lands as the opponent advances. But this game ends up developing in a very interesting way. Alright, so we draw Disperse, which can be used just to bounce the Jotty Offshoot to connect. Very important just to get our 3rd mana, which we now have, and we can add pressure to the board with Mantis Rider. Still missing lands, still don't have card draw, although the opponent had missed out on some ramp and instead just hitting some lands, although they've got ridiculous amounts of mana. Check it out. At this point, they go for an Ugin the Spirit Dragon. They can sacrifice their Sanctum of Ugin, which they do, and they go ahead and reveal an Ulamog. So we're going to have to fight through an Ulamog and an Ugin this game. They decide to bolt our Honored Hierarch, so finally draw a 3rd land, which allows us to play a Mantis Rider and knock their Ugin down to 3. And they are just hitting land drops and just decide to trade the Ugin and the Jotty Offshoot with 2 Mantis Riders. So we have blue, green, white. We can't actually cast Savage Knuckleblade. We still can't cast Dig Through Time. We still don't have targets for Fiery Impulse or Wild Slash, and the opponent has 5, 6, 7, 8 mana, so we're only 2 turns away from Ugin, if they have the mana for that. There's another Jotty Offshoot, and Nissa's Renewal, so they've got buckets of mana, although they only have the 1 card left, which is Ugin. I decide to Jeskai Charm to put the Jati Offshoot back in the opponent's deck so that they have to top deck it again next turn. At this point, Ulamog comes down, and they have 34 life, so it's going to be a tough game targeting these lands. However, we can Ojutai's Command to counter that and get an Honored Hierarch back. Fiery Impulse the Honored Hierarch, and check out the situation now. We have 2 Honored Hierarchs in play. We're about to be able to cast Savage Knuckle Blade, and Dig Through Time is going to come up. And the opponent, this is from basically having a pretty miserable start to the game. However, at this point, the opponent draws, check it, another Ugin. So at that point, that's pretty much too much, and we have to go to the next game, which we will do. It's worth noting that there's nothing in standard like Cavern of Souls going to keep this. 3 disperses in this version. There's no... Oh, and as for sideboarding, should mention that... we'll take a look at the deck when the first fetch land comes up. There's nothing like Cavern of Souls. There's nothing like Summoner's Trap. So when Ramp has those cards, they can kind of handle a counterspell strategy. But it becomes more difficult as is. Although, I mean, once again, we're stuck on lands. Although we can connect here, we can disperse that Nissa. And while we only have 1 land, our Honored Hierarchs are at least up. Dispersing Nissa doesn't feel great, but we're not winning this game on cards anyways. We're going to win on tempo if possible. So Mantis Rider comes in. Opponent plays their first ramp spell on Explosive Vegetation. Is able to flip the Nissa and make a 4/4. It's -3 to put in, -2 to put in the legendary elemental. Ashaya, okay. So at this point we have to decide. We've got a counter spell. Opponent's 4, 5, 6, 7. Or we could, yeah, it's basically, I decided to play Clutch. Did I misclick and not, oh, there we go. Yeah, I decided to play Clutch to bounce the token and go for the kill. Attack the opponent for 5, put them to 8. The Nissa is not going to be able to make another blocker this turn anyways. And now we can keep up Disdainful Stroke for whatever their big threat is. Nissa's Pilgrimage is fine. They go for a Hangerback Walker, which we can hit with Disdainful Stroke. Or we can just disperse it. Either way works out to be the same. So I go for the disperse. Finally, we draw another land. Check the contents of the deck. In this case, it is a good call to have both the Jeskai Ascendancy combo and the regular combo, because they don't have Dramoka's Command. And we can cut almost all of our burn because it's not very useful for counter spells as well. So removal light, counter heavy, combo heavy makes for a good plan against ramp decks. But after top decking our second land, we can hit the opponent for 8 and force a third game. Moving on to game 3. Starting with Honored Hierarch once again. Pretty insane start. Can connect. We've got Disperse. Opponent didn't have a Hangerback Walker this game, although we have Disperse for it. Let the stuff resolve. Anticipate to dig. And at this point, play a Mantis Rider. Let the opponent. Play a Jeskai Ascendancy so we can threaten comboing off. Well, there's multiple ways to play that. We could play Mantis Riders and go aggro, or we could play Jeskai Ascendancy, which I like because we have these 2 digs stuck in our hand. And the more that we can discard cards, the better. Although we did tap out for a turn to let the opponent play Explosive Vegetation, but we have Disdainful Stroke for what actually matters. I don't want to waste Disdainful Stroke right now, if possible. So hit the opponent to 15. See what they go for. Ugin, let the opponent Sanctum first. Or not. I guess that was a mistake. minor mistake. What we're supposed to do here is let the opponent make their Sanctum of Ugin decision before countering, but it doesn't really matter too much because we're in a opponent grabs 2 Hangerback Walkers. We're in a position where we can, or just 1 Hangerback Walker, we can untap and try to combo off. We can dig through time, see what we hit. Grabbing a Disdainful Stroke, probably a good call, is the main thing. Attack and Rattleclaw Mystic so that we can play both this turn and threaten a kill on the following turn. Hangerback Walker for 1, we have Disperse for that, Map the Waste is fine, and there's a Dromoka's command as well, so we can also combo off and go absolutely nuts here. So, it's definitely possible to lose the ramp match, but this is generally, it can play out something like this. They're slow, they're vulnerable to counter spells, they have a few blockers for Honored Hierarch, but not always. We can support 2 win conditions and 6 counter magic, so this is probably the best matchup. And I'll see you in the next match. Yo, welcome back. T-Woo here, bringing you another post-match playthrough of Tempo Temurskai Standard, Honored Hierarch, Standard Delver. This time looking at what I consider to be the most difficult matchup, which is Bant Hardened Scales. There's a lot of reasons this matchup is difficult. They have they can keep up with us on tempo. They have flyers through Abzan Falconer and reach through Avatar the Resolute. Their creatures are enormous, and they have 4 Dromoka's commands so they can break up our combo, so tends to be a really difficult matchup. Also, they have a lot of blockers, which can make it difficult for Honored Hierarch to come in, although this time we did connect. So, coming in for 3, put the opponent to 15. We have Fiery Impulse ready to go on the Hangerback Walker if we want to. Servant of the Scales. So, this is what I'm talking about with the tempo and the reach. Avatar the Resolute has reach. It gets a +1 counter for each other creature you control with a +1 counter. So, in order to make this smaller, and this Hangerback Walker is going to turn into a 4/4 and a 6/6, and to get some fuel into our graveyard with Treasure Cruise, I think it's a good call to Fiery Impulse the Hangerback Walker in response. I don't understand this though. With a +1 counter for each other creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. So shouldn't this... Oh, Hardened Scales, yep. So it's a 5/4. That's why that works. This card is insane when the deck gets going. And they already have a creature that is basically too big for us to attack through, so our tempo is stalled, and they have more power on the battlefield. At this point we can Treasure Cruise, to find a Disdainful Stroke, really looking for some bounce spells. Mantis Riders to block a 1/1, although Dromoka's command is pretty brutal. Let's see how the opponent played it. They fought Servant of the Scales with Mantis Riders to get +1/+1 counters. Put the +1 counters. So they decided to make a play that pushed as much damage as possible, although they could have really... and killed our Mantis Riders. They could have destroyed even a second creature, but they chose to get more damage from it. But yeah, at this point, we pretty much need to draw Bounce to have any shot of success. But we don't. And the Wild Slash and such are too small to really make a huge impact. Worth noting that a lot of their creatures have Trample as well, so it's really tough to chump block. And another reach creature, this time with 3, because it gets 1, 2, 3. And with them at 8, there's just no way. Not really the best draw, but we need a perfect draw and them to have a bad draw to really win this matchup, so dead. Check out game 2. So this matchup is winnable, but it's probably necessary if you choose this deck, or if you care to imagine how it can be beaten. It probably requires special sideboard cards. Two of them that come to mind are Exert Influence. For 5 mana can steal an 5/4 Avatar of the Resolute or something like that. There's a Disperse. Although we want to lead with Honored Hierarch to maximize our chance of getting in there. So we can steal their biggest creature. That can give us a chance of victory. We can make for a good tempo play. Or we can use something like Planar Outburst or End Hostilities to... Planar Outburst is the one, destroy all creatures, and that is not the best answer for Hangerback Walker, but otherwise removes everything big. So here, Clutch of Currents for the Hangerback Walker, and we're able to connect with Honored Hierarch, and we're on pace to casting Dig Through Time at some point, so things look okay. A note on sideboarding is I have access to only one Exert Influence in this version of the deck. We'll see if it's even in there. Exert Influence, negate. Somehow it didn't end up in the deck this time. But for this match, I wasn't totally configured to winning. As I say, it's a difficult matchup, and it is probably going to require more than just one card to win it. But you can see how playing Exert Influence on this Mana Gorger Hydra right now would totally reverse the game. Meanwhile, Mana Gorger Hydra just grows out of control, and the opponent tends to have just too many threats that we need to bounce. Like, we need to bounce this one, we need to bounce that one. But if we had, for instance, in Planar Outburst, we could clear the board and leave the opponent only with a Hangerback Walker, which would give us a good chance. So I think that the reason that this matchup I found it so difficult is because I haven't taken the threat of it seriously, and if I thought that it was a major metagame player that absolutely needed to be beaten, instead of been focusing on Autarka Red, then I would give maybe 4 sideboard slots to it, 2 Planar Outbursts, 2 Exert Influence, and try to play the control game. Yeah, 5/4 Avatar of the Resolute, just ridiculous. Chose not to play Tormenting Voice, instead of holding up Treasure Cruise. Meanwhile, check out the opponent's board. We're just totally dead. Those things have trample. I go for the double block. And things get interesting, actually, as we drew Jeskai Ascendancy. So, at this point, it looks like Clutch of the Currents should have been used to awaken maybe a Cinderglade or a Lumbering Falls. The reason being, our forest is only making green mana, and we now are going to have Jeskai Ascendancy in play and a chance to combo off. Cast Tormenting Voice, or rather Treasure Cruise. Although, to be fair, we're super dead on this regardless. But that is a plan that you could try. Jeskai Ascendancy combo. The main drawback of it is the risk of super dead. Can't really cast anything. The main risk of it is death to Dramoka's command, which destroys the Jeskai Ascendancy. So that's a tough match. Figured it makes sense to show a really difficult matchup in here as well. And I'll see you in the next one, which should be somewhat more successful. Welcome in, T-Woo, Travis Wizard here, bringing you another match of the Tempo Temurskai deck, this time against a Mardu deck, and this ends up being an extremely interesting match, especially the second game. Certain features of Mardu with their Crackling Dooms, their Draconic Roars, their Thunderbreak Regents can take control of the board and push a lot of damage. However, they don't have blue card draw, so the long game tends to allow us to come back and win, which makes for very interesting matches. Now, this game is not the most entertaining, and is really decided by that attack with Hangerback Walker there. Because right now we don't have any red mana, but the opponent's attack allows us to clutch that Hangerback Walker, get in, and that gives us the red mana, where the opponent is and we have negate up to protect it. The opponent misses their 4th land, and we would be in the exact same boat, casting nothing if not for that attack, where we're able to pull ahead. So, you know, that's not necessarily the best game, and I'm not just cherry picking. I don't mean to cherry pick the games where the opponent get unlucky, but I picked this match because of how entertaining this second game is. It's really a mind-boggling match, as we will see, and we're going to see the full late-game power of both of these decks, as well as a lot of judgment calls, tough decisions back and forth, perhaps a few play mistakes, but otherwise, of all the decks I've seen with this game, this one's maybe the best. Alright, worth noting, the opponent plays Despise. They get to look at our hand. For the rest of the game, they're going to know that we have a few counter spells, etc. So they have that information. Second turn. I didn't keep up Negate mana or Disdainful Stroke mana on the 3rd turn, instead choosing to get the Cinderglade so we can get red mana up as soon as possible to cast Jeskai Ascendancy on the 3rd turn. It was basically two diverging games at this point. One where we keep up Disdainful Stroke to counter a 4-drop creature. One where we get Jeskai Ascendancy into play as fast as possible to not really fuel our combo with this deck, but to fuel our Delve card draw in a long game. And I decided to sneak in the Jeskai Ascendancy, which turned out to be a judgment call that puts us in a really deep hole as the opponent plays a Thunderbreak Regent. 4/4, when it becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, Thunderbreak Regent deals 3 damage to that player. So we don't have an answer, it's got too much toughness. And at this point, normally I would keep up counter magic, but since we don't have an answer, screw it. We're going to Treasure Cruise to look for something to deal with that, which is really just a bounce spell. I didn't sideboard a whole lot for this matchup because the green, well, we didn't see a whole lot game 1 is the main reason. And I don't know that I like comboing in this match anyways. So basically kept it roughly the same. Probably with too much burn. If there's a 3rd game, I'm going to sideboard that stuff out. Fortunately, Treasure Cruise finds us Clutch of Currents, which can bounce the Thunderbreak Regent, and then we can use Disdainful Stroke to counter it, but not before we take a beating, dropping 6 to 11, fetch our way down to 10, and then Clutch of Currents. Thunderbreak Regent does 3 more damage to us, putting us to 7. So let's kind of take a recap of where we are in this game. It's turn 5 and we're already down to 7. And we would probably be roughly around 20 if I hadn't tapped out for that Jeskai Ascendancy. However, we have more cards than the opponent. We've got counter spells. And with Jeskai Ascendancy, we're in a good position to win the long game. But we're still behind on board because of that Shambling Vent, which we also don't have an answer for other than blocking right now. And the opponent has burn in their deck. Shambling Vent puts us to 5. Go ahead and anticipate here. Looking for probably another a Fiery Impulse to deal 3 damage to that. Don't find it. Found a pain-free source of land. At this point we can play a Mantis Rider. Keep up. We need to hold Disdainful Stroke for that Thunderbreak Regent all game long. Mantis Rider gives us a way to block Shambling Vent, except that the opponent has removal, which we can't tap out to counter. So here we go. Now down to 3 with the opponent at 23. And we finally drew Fiery Impulse. So we can not only send in with Mantis Riders, but we have Fiery Impulse to clear the Shambling Vent, and we have Disdainful Stroke to protect us. However, opponent is Crackling Doom, and yet again we can't tap out. So let's take a moment to examine our position here. We're at 1 life. The opponent is at 22. That's going to be difficult to come back. However, we've somewhat turned the corner. We're up 2 cards and our deck is full of gas. 4, 5, 6, 7. We're technically only up 1 card because the opponent has an extra land on us. But we have the Jeskai Ascendancy, so at this point we can turn the corner though, because we can Fiery Impulse the Shambling Vent. We have Disdainful Stroke, we have Negate, we have 2 Disdainful Strokes. We should be able to survive whatever the opponent can throw at us. or we might be able to survive. So there's a Prairie Stream, which I like because I want to get creatures in play. Choosing not to give the Savage Knuckleblade haste so we can keep up 2 counterspells. Alright, here's the only real misplay of the game, is the opponent played Draconic Roar on Savage Knuckleblade without revealing a dragon, which we know they have. If they had, it would deal 3 damage and we would be forced to negate it, and we'd be down to negate. But instead we get to keep that negate for later, which, as we're about to see, is actually what wins us the game. So otherwise we'd be forced to a game 3. But I think the opponent played this game otherwise very well, and for me that's just a misclick. That's not, they didn't make a judgment call, and we benefited from that. So as we see, they have Crackling Doom. So if they had clicked correctly, we would have lost. But here we go and negate that. Surviving still at 1, but now we have more lands, and we've got a slight advantage. Alright, Disdainful Stroke countering Thunderbreak Regent. And this is the decision of the match, because we have to discard one, we have to keep one. We're at 1 life. Disdainful Stroke will counter a Thunderbreak Regent. Dromoka's Command, damage prevention ability, can stop a Crackling Doom or another Draconic Roar or something like that. So which one do you discard, which one do you keep? Tell me in the comments, I'm interested. I thought about this for about 4 minutes. So we need to examine the play situation. Say we keep Disdainful Stroke, we can attack for 7, Disdainful Stroke, attack for 7, or attack for 9. 9 plus 7 is 16. That's not going to be enough to win in 2 turns. However, if we discard Disdainful Stroke, we can attack with Lumbering Falls to 7. Even if the opponent has Thunderbreak Regent, we can untap, attack for 7. Dromoka's Command plus 1. 2 Jeskai Ascendancy triggers for 10 damage. So even if the opponent has Thunderbreak Regent, Dromoka's Command is actually going to be the answer for it. And now we have Dromoka's Command to protect from a burn spell as well. So I think that Dromoka's Command ends up being the right one to pick, because it protects us from everything. Attack for 7 to put the opponent to 11, slowly turning this game around. And here they do end up having the Thunderbreak Regent, but with our attack here, it represents 10 damage. So if the opponent goes ahead and blocks the Lumbering Falls, which they have to do, they have to block something. Dromoka's Command, just for the +1, not targeting that Thunderbreak Regent. Using Jeskai Ascendancy's ability, and we hit a Treasure Cruise, which is just the nuts. So we're going to have a 5/5. Opponent takes 5, goes to 5. And we can Treasure Cruise here, draw a fresh grip, untap Lumbering Falls, looking for another counterspell, which we don't hit, and we have to hope to dodge one more turn of Crackling Doom. And there's another Thunderbreak Regent, which we can't touch with Disperse. However, at this point we can kind of combo off as we wake up 2 Thunderbreak Regents, and we can Wild Slash the opponent, which should basically be enough. The opponent has a This is interesting, actually. Yeah, there's so many tactics, so many plays. The opponent has a Mardu Charm here, which makes 2 1/1s. However, they played before we tapped our Thunderbreak Regents, which means we can actually disperse one of those, untap and attack for lethal. Otherwise, the opponent would have been able to trade the Thunderbreak Regent, block, and have one more chance to top deck Crackling Doom. So, yeah, this game, I mean, is just a good game of Magic. It's not so much the matchup, but the players. The tactics in this game and the decisions were pretty absurd. Hope you found this entertaining. I hope this either saves you money or encourages you to try out more exciting decks in Standard. At the very least, stretches your thinking. If you find this series useful, you can support this content at Patreon down below. Otherwise, I'll see you in the comments. Let me know what you think. And see you next time. Much love.